Well, hello. Here's another edition of Rain's World. And today I have Mr. Gene Jochen, and he wants to talk about performance management systems. Gene is a dynamic, determined, and he's possessing an inspiring positive outlook, which I can say for a fact. I've known Gene for quite a while. He has 3 decades of top-level business leadership experience, having forged an illustrious career with a Fortune 100 company where he and I met. Gene is an educator, an entrepreneur, and owner of Be Smart Inc., a consulting company specializing in talent and performance management. Welcome, Gene.
Hello, Rain. Great to be here.
Yeah, I love that. And Gene's coming in from Canada, Peterborough, right?
Peterborough, Ontario, Canada. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So let me kick us off with a question. Why do you feel that a performance management system is beneficial?
Well, from my years of experience, of course, working with many operating companies and just in any type of business environment, I think, it's important that the leadership of a company supports the full gamut of performance management. So really from, hiring, onboarding someone, and then through their entire career, and then, promotability. It enhances everyone's, leadership ability if they're moving into leadership roles or whatever role they're in. We want people to be at their best and excel at their best in every position. And so having a robust performance management system really aligns a corporation or a company or a small business with that outcome.
Very cool. Cool. Thank you. So where have you most effectively used a performance management in your professional career?
Well, working with a Fortune 100 company, I think, fortunate over my career. A few times I went through the process of companies with mergers and acquisitions, and I was worked for some smaller companies that got larger and larger over time, and in an early stage of a company, people can work in a role. They can have many hats and they can do different types of roles. They might jump into accounting, they might jump into sales, they can jump into purchasing, marketing, and do combinations of those things. But as a company grows, then they become more isolated into their own work environment, right? And then they really need to maximize their productivity in that role. And so it kind of compresses their I guess their job role, and they become specialists, more specialized,
Mhm.
and they really have to become an expert in that field. And then when people are looking to cross promote into other areas of a company or anything, sort of need to be cross trained, and they lost that ability
Right.
along the way. So the more they're trained, I guess, broad across the company, understanding how the company operates from every angle, and then that where they're needed too. Sometimes people are put into roles
Mhm.
maybe before they're ready. We want to have people ready.
Right.
And then the next gamut, what you asked, where I've seen it is, as companies get larger, and they whether through merger acquisitions or through sales growth,
Right.
then people you need really strong people. And so the people that were there in the beginning, they get elevated in terms of their knowledge and their expertise and their role and what they've learned to and evolved into. And so you really need to have a finger on it. And from an HR standpoint, and the leadership, I'll say, from the C-suite leaders and the president or owner of the company, there's more of a higher level of expectation from everyone too,
Right.
right?
Yeah, so absolutely. So again, what I'm hearing on this is that there's got to be a commitment from everybody because this is not an easy thing to set up, is it?
No, and that's why I like to work with companies, and we call it a performance management system. It's a system, right? It's almost like an SOP, or it is a standing operating procedure of the company as well. People think, oh, HR, let HR handle it, and
Right.
that they'll create a training department and they'll train the people, and but really it has to start top down. You really need to identify job descriptions. That's, I think, the first place you need to start. Do you have clear job descriptions? What are
Right.
people paid to do, right? When they come to work, do they know what their goals are? Do they have that built into the system? And then you move into the more robust, aligning it to the performance pay, equity pay, as people get paid, they get paid a salary, bonus structures, and so it's such a a huge undertaking,
Mhm.
and definitely not something that can be taken lightly. I think it's got to
Right.
be engaged and supported from the top down.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So, I know as you go through doing this, and you talked about it from large corporations to small businesses, are there different types? I mean, if I have a small business, is it different for me to build a performance management system than if I'm in the C-suite of a large corporation?
Well, I think for a smaller, like a family run, or or a smaller startup. Again, you're in the beginning stages of things where you don't really have clearly defined job
Right.
descriptions, right? So it's, I think, when you get to, like, I'd say 100, staff of 100 or more, where or could be less, of course, too, but you've got to have clearly defined job descriptions, job expectations. It depends how much control the leadership has as well, in terms of how the pay structure that comes into play. Do they offer a bonus structure? Do they what is entailed in that? When you get into let's say a large corporation where there's stockholders and stakeholders, then you're into, you've got to report things a little differently as
Okay.
well. You need things much more clearly defined, right? So
Gotcha.
I think that's part of the weight of where it should be applied. But I think the sooner you can get people understanding what their roles are, their job descriptions clearly defined, tasks that people are responsibilities that people are responsible for, and then you have kind of the pyramid to the leadership level. And if you once you start to say silo off, but you've got clearly like a purchasing department, and you've got a marketing department, and you've got sales and operations, and whatever the other various units are, and you don't have people doing 3 or 4 of those
Right.
roles. Leaders might lead those roles, but now you've got a vice president that looks after sales, marketing, and customer service, let's say, and then you've got to have a sales manager, you've got to have a marketing manager, customer service manager, then you have the people that report up. So, and then you've got natural turnover, those things you need to watch, and you need to monitor and manage as well. And then when you're hiring, when you're growing, that's a good problem to have, but it's also
Right.
a challenging problem, because you got to hire the right people. And so, aligning it with a strong HR person is
Mhm.
important. HR is so busy in let's say a company that's growing,
Mhm.
just on the hiring and turnover, and putting people through 30-day, 60, 90-day performance
Mhm.
plans as they come on board. So it really starts at onboarding, but it has to start at the top, and depends on the size of the company how broad it gets. A lot of the bigger companies, have a talent management or training and development team
Right.
that can align it. But it can start anywhere, really.
Right. So great piece there. And I'm imagining having a process like that helps keep everybody consistent and aligned, and maybe even out of court, right? In some cases.
Well, I'm glad you're saying that. That's where my head just went to. So yeah. So first of all, like having clear job descriptions,
Yeah.
having a clear interview questions. Let me start back up, right? Like, if you
Right.
have an interview process, what kind of questions you ask in an interview? Today, with legal issues, there's certain things you
Right.
can ask and cannot ask. So you need to have your staff, who's ever doing the interviewing and the hiring, trained properly in the interview process. Then you interview them. Then you have the on the hire, right? And you're going to hire them with the expectations. You hire the best candidate for a role. Then you give them an onboarding a task list, or, you want to onboard them, and you don't just ignore them after that. So they pass a probationary period, 90 days, and then you just turn them over to the manager, says, here's this person, now you've got them for life. Well, what do I do with them, right? So the management needs to be, involved and engaged too for any hire, to make sure that you want them to, to stay in the role as long as possible, because today with the generations, that's a whole nother topic, what happens with the turnover and expectations. But if you're developing your new talent all along in their career, then you define clear career paths for them. Then you align it with the, how is your pay, how do your pay equity program, right? So are they strictly salary? Are they commissionable for sales? Is there a bonus structure? How do you pay that out? And then you have to tie in the whole performance plan. So do you do an annual review? I know companies that do an annual review every 3 years, if they're lucky, and today, so if you're not doing an annual review, like, how do you hold people accountable? Then, you can go from an annual, you can do a semi-annual, 6 months, you can do quarterly, or you turn it into a full-blown coaching system, maximizing performance, where you constantly are coaching them, documenting everything. So let's take it to the one extreme. If somebody's not successful in their role, the old way would be, what do? We just promote them somewhere else and move them somewhere else in the company, or we just fire at will. Well, we can't do either of those. We don't want to give somebody else our problem, and legally we cannot fire at will. So somebody not performing in their role. Do you have clearly documented performance plans? Did you have did you put in a system of where you have documented agreements on what they're to or to not do, and helping them to turn them around? Or when you get to a place where you have to exit someone, you have to have it well documented. So that's kind of the one extreme. Then the other extreme is taking somebody that's doing a great job or doing well in their role, and we want to maybe promote them into another position. Well, do you have some sort of a performance plan for them where they can develop and grow? And if they're in the sales, but they have aspirations of moving into purchasing or into another department, are you developing them for future roles? Do they have aspirations for leadership? So all of this gets uncovered in a performance plan and a performance discussions as well. And then, with the generations today, we know that, there's an expectation, I guess, that people will change jobs. Used to be, once in a career, and then it was eight times in a career, and I'm hearing numbers into the, double digits now. The expectation. So, the more you can give people money, but money isn't the most high, number one motivator for many people. It's giving them opportunities, whether it's stretch roles, whether it's opportunities, not over promising, but as a company grows, we have the ability to move them into other areas. But not training them, there's an always, use the word training now, that there's a cliche. What if we train somebody and they leave? Well, what if we don't train them and they stay?
Yeah, I love that.
I love that one too, right? So I'm kind of all over the place, but I think, again, it is a system, and that's what I'm saying. Like, you've got to look at it from the balcony, and each person identifies, and then, you can get into so many, different micro ways to motivate them and train them and develop. You got to know every single person intimately in your organization, top down. The president needs to know his leadership team, or the owner, and then the leaders, they need to know their next layer, and then depends on how many layers of management there are, and then getting down to the associate level in every department. And again, so it's kind of, you're working with the top tier, you're always working, to develop them. The president's working on his succession plan, right? He's looking for his way out, or her way out. So what is their succession? And then each of those leaders should be also having their own, succession plan behind them. And then it rolls downhill. And then you've got a young hot shot person that comes into the organization in their early 20s. There's no reason they can't stay for 20 years in an organization, or, to retirement. It's less and less we see, but the opportunities are there. if they feel that they're engaged, they're treated fairly, they're, well compensated, of course, and developed and have opportunities.
Yeah. So interesting, you brought up something there, and I didn't find you all over the place, my friend.
And I
It was very clean. I remember going to a program where I was learning about coaching, I believe it was a leadership program, and the presenter stood up and said, "So, raise your hand and tell me how many of your people are dead wood." And you get
right,
several people like raising their hands. He says,
yes,
"Okay." He says, "Question two, did you hire them that way or did you make them?"
right,
And I love that from what you just talked about. If I have a solid performance management system, I've eliminated both those pieces. So I
right,
love that.
absolutely.
Yep. So
Yeah.
where does a new leader begin to master this process, Gene?
So at what level are you saying? Like somebody newly promoted into a management role, or
Yeah, or you're going into a company and you don't see a system like that, and you want to help build one, or get more familiar with how they work.
sure. So again, you've got to have the buy-in from the owner, the
Right.
president, the top, and as well any of the C-suite. They've got you got to really start at the top, right? So
Yeah.
you're building a culture, and if it's let's say a company that the owner started the company, it's a family-run business, whatever, they fly by the seat of their pants for so many years, let's say, or a couple of years, and as they get bigger, you can't do it without a system, because of legalities, of course. And as you develop people into those, they're a bigger role, for instance, they've got to be, it's got to start at the top.
Yeah.
And then, so you're absolutely, so coaching, so the top leadership gets a leadership framework of coaching
Mhm.
skills that a leader should have, right? So they have other things into their, and I would say, call it a framework, call it competencies,
Mhm.
identifying specific competencies for the leaders of the organization. And then it rolls down to the next layer of management, and what they're responsible for is in their coaching competencies. And then the coachee, will say,
Yeah.
the associate level, they're not coaching,
Yeah.
but I'll tell you a quick story. It happened to me firsthand. I worked for a big company at the time, but they didn't have a training department, no
Right.
training. I was a sales associate, and a week later I was promoted to a manager with no managerial
Right. Right.
experience.
Right.
Right now I had enough, and I watched, and I had university and all of
Right.
that, college, but I didn't have any practical experience or
Gotcha.
exposure, other than I see what some people did wrong and I see what people did right, and I tried
Right.
to exemplify that until those days are gone. Like you're not going to succeed,
Right.
80%, probably didn't succeed as manager. We've all worked for incompetent bosses,
Yep.
managers. We've all worked for leaders that were terrible. I
Yep.
wouldn't call them a leader.
Yep.
They were, you would never follow them, right? And when people, often, when people quit a company, the first person they don't quit the company, they quit their leader or their
Yeah.
manager,
Good point.
so if so you really, you need to develop a culture of coaches where the managers know the skill set, and it is learnable. I don't think I think people, they need to break down their egos
Right.
and be open-minded and say, okay, you know what, I want to be a good leader. Who doesn't want to have look back in their life and say, people really respected my leadership?
Yeah.
I don't think there's too many people may go through life and not have examined themselves that way. They might think they're a good leader because they lead by power or intimidation or fear, the old school, right? And they probably went to their grave saying, oh, I was a good leader back in my day, but today, I mean, we all think about a good leader that you've had, right? What were their qualities? And that's where I start with that, at the leadership level, and say, what, look about your leader and of the company. So, and if they're not walking the talk from the top down, it's never going to work,
Right. Right.
so yeah, you need that engaged, you need them to really examine themselves, and then you get into the whole psychology, level 5 leadership, and where they're leading from the heart, not from the head.
Yeah, yeah. So if I'm a CEO of a company, that's something you can help me with?
Absolutely. And that's exactly where I like to start. Meet with the president or CEO and, what is the culture? What's the dynamic? And you can get it from turnover.
Yeah,
You can just let me see your, tell me about your turnover. How many, and like you said earlier, how did they become dead wood?
yeah,
Right. I believe it was Jack Welch who had said, he would like to turn over the bottom 10%,
right,
every year. And I think that was way excessive, but,
right.
that was a bit of managed by fear, but it also motivated people. But at the same time, if you're hiring the best people, you don't need to turn them over,
Correct.
that frequently. There's a natural attrition, right?
Yeah,
So examine yourself as a leader, and that's where I would start. And I wouldn't, I would be blunt. It depends on the personality style of the CEO to, how blunt you can hit them.
yeah,
But, obviously, like my tagline for my company is people, productivity, profitability.
yeah,
So I start there. I said, do you want to be profitable? Yes. How's your productivity? Well, we could, do this, we could do better here. Right. What's the level of engagement from your people?
yeah.
Because without people, like low motivated
Right.
people, right? Low morale leads to low productivity, leads to low productivity. You start with you manage and motivate, and your people are highly motivated, highly engaged. You're going to have higher productivity. You're going to have higher profitability. So talk their language, right? It's the bottom line to the CEO or to the president, but what's your means to that end, right? Do you have people that are highly motivated and engaged, or you're turning them over? And I can easily look at your, talk to your HR, and we get that. What are you getting? What are you hearing in your exit interviews? Why are they quitting? Why are they leaving the company? If they're not all leave, we've had managers, we've turned over managers because I had a sales team, the manager was a terrible leader, and salespeople were quitting. And then we looked at it, and like a hockey team, who do they fire? They
Mhm.
don't fire the player, they fire the coach,
Yeah,
or any sports team. So that, it doesn't start at the bottom, it starts at the top.
yeah.
So we
And I
lift.
love that. I love that. I love that analogy too. It wouldn't be Canada if we didn't talk
I
hockey
had to
on
throw the
this conversation.
hockey reference
But
in there.
I do also know Gene's got a background from New York, and there's a New York sign over his left shoulder, and that's coming out.
I like it. My accent, when I get passionate, absolutely it
Yeah.
comes out. My R's.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Joshin. It was a wonderful time. I learned a lot, and I
Thank you.
appreciate it. So be smart, right?
Smart. I use, I stole the SMART acronym, right?
I
So
love it.
yeah, and I'm here to help.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ed.
Appreciate you.
You too. Cheers.